If I were to ask a group of random people across the country the question, are there any slaves in the United States at this moment? I guarantee you 99% of people would say no. And that's a real issue. Slavery isn't a thing of the past. It's very much so prevalent in our society today. Experts haven't been able to give an exact number of victims in the United States, but it's estimated to be in the hundreds of thousands. How is it possible that it's almost 2019 and there are hundreds of thousands of innocent people enslaved in our country? Wasn't slavery abolished in 1865? The answer is human trafficking. According to the International Labor Organization, there are approximately 40.3 million victims of human trafficking worldwide. 40.3 million people being forced to have sexual relations against their will or being forced to work in inhumane conditions for little to no pay. But it's never really talked about in the mainstream media or on TV for that matter. And that can leave the impression that human trafficking isn't a big deal or a major issue, when in reality it is. Human trafficking, whether it's for sex or for work, is slavery, and something needs to be done about this issue. In our project, we focused on labor trafficking, which accounts for approximately 81% of human trafficking victims worldwide. Before we can start working on making a change, you must first understand what exactly labor trafficking is. Labor trafficking, as defined by the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of subjection to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. Traffickers lure their victims in using various techniques and force them into either labor or sexual acts. The reason there are so many victims of this hidden crime is because worldwide, the human trafficking business is worth at least $150 billion. Since 2007, the National Human Trafficking Hotline has received reports of more than 7,800 labor trafficking cases inside the United States alone. On top of that, the U.S. Department of Labor has identified 148 goods from 76 different countries made by forced and or child labor. These goods range from carpets and furniture to food, textiles, and even alcohol. Now, how do you identify a victim? What exactly do they look like? Where can you find them? The general profile for a human trafficking victim is anybody. It can be a man, it can be a woman, a boy, a girl, someone who's young, old. It doesn't matter. It can happen in a rural area, in the suburbs. Anyone can be trafficked anywhere. However, there are a few specific indicators that you can look out for. When identifying a victim, they include, but aren't limited to, bruises or signs of physical abuse, disorientation or confusion, signs of mental abuse. Are they fearful, timid, or submissive? Do they have any signs of being deprived of food or water? Or if they're a child, have they stopped attending school? Are they disconnected from their friends? Now, not every one of these indicators is present in every single case, and not every one of these indicators may necessarily mean that human trafficking is present. But if you have any sort of feeling that trafficking might be present, do not hesitate for even a second to call the Human Trafficking Hotline at 1-888-373-7888 or call 911. Either works. So you might be asking, well, how exactly do traffickers get their victims? Well, they use a multitude of ways. They include false promises regarding nature or pay of work, offering to help pay off a debt, sweet-talking the victims, or promise of a place to stay or live. However, the way these traffickers get the most victims is runaways from halfway homes, foster homes, and shelters. The kids who run away from these places are scared. They have nothing but the clothes on their back. They have little to no money, nowhere to go, and nothing to lose. They just want to get out of the situation they were in previously and will stop at absolutely nothing to get away. This is where the traffickers come in. They know where these homes are. They patrol the area, waiting for runaway kids. And they know what they want. They promise them food, a place to stay, a steady job, money, anything to get them to come with them. And a lot of the time it works. Some more shocking statistics that we found came from humantraffickinghotline.org. They included that there have only been 602 labor trafficking cases reported so far in 2018. From these cases, experts were able to determine the top 5 states with the most human trafficking issues. First was California, second was Texas, third Florida, fourth Georgia, and fifth North Carolina. If you didn't notice, all of these states are along the coast, and there's no coincidence there. One of the main reasons these 5 states have the highest number of human trafficking cases in the country is due to the fact that they're along the coast. They provide easy access to ports, which makes shipping people to and from these states a lot easier than it would be for an inland state. Of those 602 cases, 330 were female, 272 were male. 430 were adults, 172 were children. This example here shows one difference between labor and sex trafficking. When it comes to sex trafficking, the majority of the victims are female, while in labor trafficking, the number of males versus females is a lot more similar, as you can see in this case. Another statistic from these cases, which we thought was interesting, was in only 72 of the 602 cases, the victim was a U.S. citizen. So, what happens to traffickers when they get caught? Do they go to jail or prison? Are they just heavily fined? What happens? What are they charged with? Well, the FBI has information regarding that. In 2015, 1,923 suspects were referred to the U.S. Attorney's Office for prosecution of human trafficking, which was a 41% increase since 2011. This 41% increase is good and bad. It's good because people are starting to report cases more often, but it's also bad because there are more cases popping up. Most of the suspects from these 1,923 cases were charged with slavery, forced labor, or sex trafficking, while some were charged with child pornography and a few other things. When it comes to life after human trafficking, it can be very hard for victims to reintegrate into society. Many times they end up homeless, they have no place to go after escaping the bonds of slavery. There are many houses and organizations that can help these individuals move on with their life. One that we discovered while doing research is the Covenant House. The Covenant House helps to provide refuge for these children and takes a unique approach so they can help get these kids back to a normal life. The Covenant House is one of the strongest anti-trafficking organizations in the country and is just one of many of these organizations helping to get former trafficked people back into society. When doing research, we came across a woman named Maria who told about her experience with human trafficking. Maria stopped by one of the houses she was having rehab to check in with the contractor hired to do the job. He wasn't there. Instead, Maria found 6 men sleeping on the floor in the barely habitable building. The men told her the contract had been recommended through an acquaintance. He picked them up out of state, drove them to the project, and told them they were not allowed to leave the premises. He would bring them food and water as necessary, but sometimes he didn't even bring them that, they told her. He never paid them, ever. And when the men complained, he told them he would call immigration immediately. They would be jailed and then deported. To prove he was serious, he took a group of them out to the desert and left one of them there, in the middle of nowhere, with no food or no money. So the men worked. They worked 10-hour days without breaks. They slept in the houses they were working on with cardboard boxes as blankets. Cardboard boxes. Some of the houses had electricity, some didn't. Some had running water, some didn't. So Maria called the hotline, and together with hotline advocates, worked to learn more of the men's stories, get them to a safe place to stay, and start the process of getting the men visas, while also pursuing a case against the trafficker. As mentioned before, labor trafficking is defined as the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of subjection to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. Human trafficking, and more specifically labor trafficking, is a real issue in today's society. Slavery is occurring right before our eyes, and we're not doing much about it as a society. If you think you see any of the signs we talked about today, please do not hesitate to call the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 1-888-373-7888. Thank you for watching our project, and together, I hope we can all make a difference. Thank you. If I were to ask a group of random people across the country the question, are there any slaves in the United States?